Hey, welcome to another episode of Clear Lake Connections, where we talk to the people behind the businesses of Barry, Houston. We're proudly sponsored by UTMB Health. Special guest today, Senator Larry Taylor. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me here.
So you're retiring, and you've been doing the rounds, and so everybody's been able to say nice things about you.
They really have. It's been very kind. It's been very gratifying.
And I've noticed that there's a lot of emotion there, and that and you've put your heart and soul into this, into working for this community.
Yeah.
Tell me about the things you're most proud of.
Well, there's a lot of things we've been able to do legislatively. Having been there 20 years, I got to work on a lot of really important things like education funding, reforms for education, working on the coastal barrier. That's something that's going to affect the history of this part of the world forever once we get that thing done. But then there's also the side that I've been able to actually help individuals. When you run for office, being a lawmaker, then you can go up there and make laws, but you actually get to work on a lot of other things. A lot of what we do in our office is help people interface with their state government, whether they're having an issue with this or that or adoption on it. So I have people come and thank me all the time. You helped us. We were having difficulties with an adoption, and you did this, or you helped us with our workforce commission thing. We're having this. So apparently, when an elected official calls some of these state offices, they tend to take things from the bottom of the stack and bring them up and actually look at them versus telling people we'll get to it eventually when people are really desperately needing it. So that's been very gratifying, too, to be able to actually help individuals.
Well, I'm not sure our community members fully understand or appreciate how approachable you and your office have always been. There's this mystique about politicians, but you've always been very approachable and easy to talk to, and I think that's really helped kind of cemented your place in our community.
Well, thank you. I was raised by very good parents, very blessed, and my work experience before I went into the political realm was in insurance. So I worked with all kinds of people, and there's just value in all kinds of people. I work with rich people. I work with people starting their business. I work with people that are struggling, and we're just all people, and I just feel like that's important. I felt like I was called out to run, and not because of anything special about me, but I think I was prepared by God to do that. And so I was just serving him and the people I was there to serve.
Well, and we're going to miss you. Talk about where we're at as a state and where you see us going politically and kind of economically.
Well, I think obviously I'm an optimistic person. And frankly, I don't think you should get in politics if you're not. If you don't think you can make a positive difference, why do it? If everything's going to hell in a handbasket, why do it? I really feel like Texas particularly is in a good position. We still have lots of people moving here. They're literally voting with their feet to come to Texas. And that's because of the environment that we've created. It's not the weather. Right now it's a beautiful day, but it's not always a beautiful day in the summer. And I tell people all the time, thank goodness we don't have California weather. How many people would want to live here then?
Oh, yeah.
So we have a lot of people voting with their feet, overcoming some of the environmental things they may have, but I'm very optimistic for the future of Texas. We need to make sure we get our kids educated, which is one of the big pushes I had on the education, because our largest demographic now within our public education student body is low-income students, kids who qualify for free and reduced lunch. It's 60% of our today's student body. Also our fastest growing. Well, the only way you turn that is by giving them a good education, giving them the opportunity to go get a good job, and then their kids won't be where they are. I always refer to it as family trees. We're not just looking at 5.4 million students. We're looking at all the 5.4 million family trees that can be changed by giving that one child a good education.
Yeah, there's really only two ways out of poverty, and education's the easier one, and the other is relationships.
Yeah,
and so
and hard work.
Yeah, vitally important to kind of get those kids the opportunities they need.
And if they're denied that because of a breakdown in our system, we have failed them, and as a state, we failed to protect our future.
So tell me about some of the fun things that you've gotten to do as being a part of the state.
One of the blessings I've had in this last 20 years is the people I've met, events I've been a part of, but things I've gotten to do that I would have never dreamed of doing. People I've met, some of the stars I've met, concerts I've been to. I guess one of the highlights happened about 2 months ago. I got to dive in the Georgia State Aquarium, scuba dive, with whale sharks and a manta ray that had like a 16-foot wingspan. I mean, it was crazy. But those kind of things, I think I was told I was one of the only few people that's ever been in the aquarium that didn't work there. But I got to hold up a sign welcoming the Texas delegation to this conference and all. So that was really kind of cool. But there's just a number of things like that. But really, I think the bottom line is the people I've met. I mean, I look around this community and the surrounding communities that I've worked for, and just incredible people I've gotten to meet. And then I look at my fellow legislators over 20 years. You develop lifetime bonds and friendships when you go through. There's a lot to be said for shared experiences, and when you've gone through some of the shared experiences I've gone through in the legislature, you make a lot of lifelong friends. When you're on the floor for 18 hours and come back the next morning at 7 a.m. and go at it again, it's a grind, but we're all in it together. And, we're experiencing the same. It's like, I don't want to compare it to combat, but those people, those veterans have a bond because they've done that together. So in a different way, legislators have a bond of going through that experience. Nothing like combat. I don't want anybody to say that, but you just develop bonds. And you think about your own friends growing up. It's the things you experience together that bonded you together.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have those friends. I mean, of course, some of them I don't have lifetime friendships, but most of them I do. And that's one of the things I tried to do was, once again, we all grow up in different backgrounds and different perspectives. I think it's important to listen to people from different backgrounds. And you may not agree with them. It doesn't mean you can't be friends.
Yeah, it's probably a humbling reminder to how truly big Texas is.
Oh, it's huge.
When you go to Austin. And
then you travel around the state and go to their districts and see what's going on there. It's a very large state. And like I say, the perspectives can be so different. I mean, El Paso is a whole lot different than here. Amarillo, just East Texas, deep East Texas, South Texas on the border. It's just very different.
Yeah.
And you need to listen. And when you're trying to make a law that applies to that whole state, you need to listen to a lot of different voices from different perspectives to make a good decision. Otherwise, you end up, we call them unintended consequences. You pass it when you don't listen to those ideas, and the next time you hear about, well, here's what happened here. Well, we didn't think about that because you didn't listen. So.
Well, and those relationships are so important because everybody's trying to get something for their district, and there's got to be, you've got to work those relationships to get that done.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I went to a lot of conferences and things, and I was just waiting for somebody to call me out for doing that. But the fact is, we're there in session for 140 days. You don't develop relationships where you can actually sit around and talk and get to know family about their families and all that kind of stuff in that 140, because it's intense. But when you go to these conferences, you do have time between learning about different issues and how different states are doing, which is also very important. But you get to develop those relationships with both parties in different parts of the state. And so when it gets into session and you get down to the heat of it, when you really need a vote or you need somebody to help you on this, you can go talk to them and they know you. You're a friend. It's not like, who is this and where they, I don't know if I can even trust this guy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it just like in everything else, business, it's about relationships. And so my point is I would develop those relationships. Even when I moved to the Senate, I would go to the House. They have an orientation for the freshmen. I would try to attend that every time they did it because that was my chance to meet some of the new people coming in because there's a lot of turnover. And so you want to keep those relationships, ongoing. So those, like I say, there was a lot of things we got to work on. UTMB, for example. After Hurricane Ike, they were trying to move UTMB to Austin. But with the relationships that I had, working with Craig Island, who had relationships with the Democrat Party, we were able to keep that where it is. That's something that makes a huge difference for this area. Is having
it's
medical
been massive.
research, the biohazard lab, the whole thing. But they were literally trying to move that to Austin.
Well, I couldn't imagine what our community would look like without UTMB being here. I mean, because the way they've grown, they've got the Clear Lake campus, the League City
campus. Well, Galveston
campus.
County is the largest employer. Is UTMB, and that was before they did all these remote campuses and stuff.
Yeah.
And now you look around the remote campuses, it's just a huge part of our community, but that was about to be uprooted. Now, we did ask them to become more profitable. That was one of the demands. That's why you see these off campuses where they're reaching out more into the community, not just being on the island.
Yeah. So people don't seem to, I don't think people fully appreciate or understand the way the state legislature works. I mean, it's
doesn't work.
Well, depending on your point of view. But yeah, it's 140 days every 2
other
years.
year. Every other year.
And
in odd years.
Intense.
Which is very appropriate.
Yeah.
It's in odd years. But it is intense. It starts off pretty slow, the first month because you can't even hear bills until a certain time frame. This goes back to when people were getting there by horse and buggy and took a while for news to get back home. So they have like a moratorium where you can't really vote on bills until people have had time to see them. Of course, now in the day of the internet, they get them sometimes before I get to see them. I mean, just they being people in general. But it's still there, and it kind of causes a little delay, 60-day delay on the front. And then you've got deadlines at the end. So you really don't even have a whole 140 days. There are deadlines coming. You have to get it out of this committee by this date, off the first floor vote by this date, and those kind of things. So it really gets squeezed down. There's a lot of crunch time in there, and those deadlines, every one of them is crucial, especially if your bill's in that hadn't been out yet, and you're trying to get it. Or on the House floor, I remember having pages and pages of bills on the last day, and you're wondering how far you're going to get down. My bill's on page 8. And we're on page 6. You think, we're going pretty fast. All of a sudden, you get on a bill and it just stops. And oh gosh, we're killing my bill because at midnight it's dead.
Just over.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I go on the trip every year to advocate on behalf of the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to see how the sausage is made and really learn more about the process.
Mm-hmm.
But it's. You spoke earlier about building relationships. Well, we're very strategic about it, and we actually don't necessarily go to see our representatives. We try to find representatives from other regions.
I think that's smart. We already have the relationship.
Yeah,
I already know what you guys. I mean, I've been numerous people communicate, so I think that's very wise.
So what's the biggest thing you're going to miss?
Gosh, I mean, being able to do things on a large scale with a piece of legislation. I mean, that's it's gratifying. I don't fully intend to disengage, but I obviously won't be the one making the vote. So I'll be trying to, talk to other people about some of the things I care about. So I mean, I'll miss that. And like we were just talking about, like the Chamber of Commerce. This is a fun chamber. Y'all do a lot of good things, but you're also an enjoyable event. So I need to make sure I sign up here so I'll continue getting emails and know when these things are, because otherwise I won't know. But I think it's just an important part to be a part of the community, and I'm going to miss that in a lot of respects. But I tell people I'm not going to just disappear. I'm not going away, so I'll hope to be around some.
Well, I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of MC gigs for you and stuff like that.
Well, maybe they were just letting me do that because I was a senator. I don't know. I guess I'll find out.
So we kind of talked about it a little bit, but I don't think a lot of people understand the true process of how a bill eventually ends up as a law. So if you could break that down for us.
Okay, and there's been a lot of news here lately because the pre-filing is open and people have already filed several thousand bills. There'll probably be 6,000 to 8,000 bills filed. And what that means is somebody, an author, asked Ledge Council to draft a bill with this particular purpose. That bill then has to go to a committee, which means you have to get a chairman to agree to take it up in the committee. And then they have the hearing, and they have to put it on the calendar for the committee, and then they have to vote it out. So the committee chair can say, we're not going to vote on that bill. I just heard it, or didn't like what I heard during the testimony. But then if it gets voted out, in the Senate, we don't have a calendars committee, but the lieutenant governor has to put it on the calendar for the whole Senate to hear and vote. And then the lieutenant governor also has to call it up for a vote. So it's quite a process, even in the Senate. But then if we vote it out of the Senate, then it goes to the House. Unless you have a parallel bill, it starts all over in the House. You have to get a House sponsor. The House sponsor has to find a committee that will hear it. Well, it has to get referred to a committee by the Speaker. And then that chair has to agree to hear it, set it on their calendar. And then once again, you have the hearing, and they decide whether or not they want to vote it out or not. And then if it's voted out, then it goes to the calendars committee, which I was on for a period of time when I was in the House. And that calendars committee actually sets the House calendar. So you kind of have to get it past them to get on the calendar. And then if it gets on there, then it goes to the House floor. And, of course, the House floor is crazy. I compare when I moved from the House to the Senate, I compare it like going from the zoo to the library, because the House is just so much activity. There's people lining up. You lay out your bill on the front podium, and there's people asking questions on the back mic, and there's just this constant roar of people. There's 150 people that are having conversations all the time. Every now and then you'll have the speaker gavel, and it gets so loud they can't even hear each other talking back and forth. But it's just a constant level of noise. If you haven't seen it, it's a sight to behold. It looks like a beehive of activity because people are working on their bills while stuff's going on. You're wandering around. So anyway, so you get on the House floor. If they vote it out, when I left out, you have to vote it on twice. Now the Senate, we do it boom, boom like that. If you have enough votes, if you have 21 votes, boom, we do third reading, we're done. On the House side, you got to have your first reading where they read the bill, second reading you vote on it, and then the third reading where you actually finally approve it. And then if there's any differences, it goes between the House and the Senate, what we call a conference committee. And they work out the difference and it has to go back to both chambers to vote on again. So you see all that. It's quite a bit. And then if that all gets done, we both approve it, vote on both out, then it goes to the governor. And he can either sign it, veto it, or not sign it and go into law without his signature. But that takes a period of time waiting. So you can imagine, start off with 6,000 to 8,000 bills, and we may end up at the end of the day passing 1,500. Some of those include resolutions and like that, but it's a lot of work. In 140 days, it's already shaved off on the front end and the back end. So that 140 days is intense, which is why the interim is so important. People always say, how can we impact legislation and legislators? The best time to do that is really not during session. The best time is to develop those relationships in the interim when they're home.
Yeah.
And so when you come in their office lined up behind 50 other people that they've seen already that day, they already know who you are. Oh, James, what's going on? Because I know you. I know what you're talking about, and I just hear what you have to say versus I don't know you from Adam. You walk in like, who is this guy? Are they crazy? You got all this other stuff going anytime you meet somebody new. So I shouldn't say crazy. That's probably bad. But anyway, I can because I'm not running for re-election. But anyway, so it's just important for relationship building to do that during the interim. And as a legislator, the work we do on a lot of the bills, the really important stuff doesn't happen just during that 140 days. Right now I'm on 2 state commissions. One has to do with virtual education. One of them has to do with community college finance. These are deep dives you don't have time to do in 140. We've already had over 100 hours of testimony, and you can't do that in a 140-day session. So a lot of the work is done before we get there by a few people. Not everyone obviously is involved. But for those who are carrying those bills of work on, they've been involved with them for a while.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. I think it helps demystify the whole process. Yeah. And we talked about this earlier.
Can I just say something real quick, though, about the process? We hear a lot about dysfunction in government, particularly our legislature. I say particularly Congress. I think it's important that people know that Austin is different than D.C. We actually have friends on both sides of the aisle. We can have a good, healthy debate, and then we go out to dinner together, which I think is very important. When I talked about different perspectives and different backgrounds, it's important to have those relationships. And we don't have to agree to be friends, but it's important that you have the friendship so you can have legitimate conversations. So if you can find common ground, my goal with legislation has always been to do this. Here's my idea. Here's where I think I want to be. But maybe I need to listen. Well, maybe I could do that a little bit, and then we're doing this, and we could vote for it, and everybody's happier about it. You look at something like House Bill 3, which is a huge education bill that we worked on a couple sessions ago. That ended up passing unanimously. We're talking about something to do with education. You can't pass unanimously on school boards, much less the whole legislature. It was 31 senators and 150 House members all voted for that bill because we listened to people and worked it out.
Well, that was a great example of the collaboration. Mm-hmm. I remember that.
Versus D.C., where they don't talk to each other. Yeah. Literally, will not. In fact, you almost get in trouble if they see you talking to one member and then you go visit the other member from the other party. They're like kind of mad at you because you were. I mean, it's a very bad environment for finding middle ground and working to get things done for the people. Yeah. And so I think it's important that people know the difference between Austin and D.C. It works much better.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I've seen both.
And I'll tell you one more thing. There's a push right now to stop having any minority party chairs in Texas. And that's what they do in D.C. Why would you want to import that to Texas? Yeah. Look how well it works there. If you put the minority party in all non-chairmanships, they're not in the game. All they're left to do is throw bombs and grenades because they're not part of the process. But if you make them part of the process, then they have skin in the game and they're all part of it. Yeah. And I think it would be devastating. In fact, I would not want to serve in the state legislature if they're going to change that rule. And it sounds good to some people on the surface, but those same people cannot stand what goes on in D.C. So why would they want to do that to us?
Yeah, don't import that.
Yeah.
So we've talked about your long tenure of service. How did it all start? What made you decide that it was the right move?
Well, I was on this trajectory. I just knew I was going to be elected official. No, that's not true. I actually ran for a junior high parliamentarian when I was like 12, and I won. And I swore I would never do that again because I had to get up on that stage and make that speech in front of all my classmates. I did get elected, and I learned some parliamentary rules, which has turned out good later. So my political career kind of flatlined from 7th grade till I was 38. And, I've been involved in a lot of things. I kind of told you, I think I'm a fixer. I was involved in my city, the Chamber of Commerce, economic development, worked on the 4th of July steering committee there in Friendswood. But I got involved in the Chamber of Commerce and became chairman of that. I think they called it president at the time. But I had to get up in front of a group once a month and speak. And soon thereafter, I got elected president of Rotary, so I had to get up once a week and lead a meeting in front of. So I was getting more used to talking in front of because I just really didn't enjoy that. My dad never ran for political office because he didn't like public speaking, so I just figured it was in the DNA. But being involved in all those things, and I worked on campaigns. I was very interested in politics, but I just never saw myself as the candidate. So I worked on other people's campaigns and stood out in front of the polling places and helped push people that I thought would be good office holders. Well, some people approached me. I can tell you the whole story. How long is this thing? My kids were studying Texas history. And so we thought, well, let's give them some Texas history. We went, got in our car, loaded up our tents, and stayed in Palmetto State Park. Camped out on that rocky ground, and the next morning woke up and went to the Alamo. When you walk in the Alamo, the tour guide said, now over here is where the families hid out during the siege. And then you watch the movie about Travis's letter going out, come to our aid. We're surrounded by several thousand enemy troops. 30 some odd guys from Gonzales answered that call. And they literally had to sneak past several thousand to join 150. And I was just like, man, these guys really believed in what they believed in. And then, of course, the families, it just made all, so I'm walking in the Alamo with 3 kids, one, carrying one, 2 hands on it, just walking through there. So I'm already in that family mode. And then same trip, we went up to Austin just to see the Capitol. Didn't even take the tour. We were probably there 20 minutes. Just kind of wasn't like I was going, man, I could just see myself. I had nowhere in my focus. That next week, I was invited to go to a lunch. And a gentleman who was a state representative at the time and another guy I'd worked on some campaigns with who ended up being a county commissioner asked me to consider running for state rep. And they went through and showed, I told you I'm a fixer, right? They'd showed me several things they had not been able to get done in the Texas legislature they've been working on, and they're just common sense things. I'm like, well, that's crazy. It's only 140 days, right? This is where I've got sucker written on my forehead because it's only 140 days every other year. Well, I could do that, Here's my chance to give back and do those kind of things. So I jumped in and ran, and that was in 1998. Started in 1997 for the 98 elections. Had a great campaign. Miracle things happened during the course of that. Real quick example, they told me I need to hire a campaign manager. This is like September for November. You need to hire a campaign manager. Okay, where do you find? Well, they're usually college age, somebody really interested in politics, but somebody you really trust. Okay, this is September. Where do I find this college age? I think college kids are in college. And I live in Friendswood. There's not really a college there. But so that Sunday I walked into church in the vestibule. There was this young lady that grew up in our church. Her family had actually lived with my parents' son when they were transitioning in and out. Her dad had moved to Oklahoma to become a pastor up there. She had spent the last year working in the governor's office in Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
So here's a young college-age student. She ran in the dean of the Baylor Law School. He invited her to come to law school. So she was waiting for law school to start up in January. So within 2 days, on a Sunday, they told me I had to have this person by the next week. There she is on Sunday. So it was just miracles like that. I was also the #1 money raiser as a challenger that year. I was getting money from, I don't know where it was coming from. I didn't know these people. I'm a little guy. I'm trying to figure out how to get my name around Galveston County, much less the state of Texas. But we raised a lot of money. We ran a great campaign. I thought we're going to win this thing. Man, election night, I'm out there pulling up signs. The poll's close. Somebody called me, it's over, Larry. And I lost 58% to 42%. And I was devastated. I'm like, what in the world? But I realized I'm supposed to be doing something in politics. Too many things happened. So they'd been asking me to run for city council and school board a couple of times, and I'd turn them down. I've got a young family, small business to run. In a small town, if you're in business, you don't even want to tick people off, take the wrong side of an issue. You could actually lose customers. But I was convinced I needed it, so I signed up for city council, filed against an incumbent. They dropped out, so I was able to walk on the city council. because I was exhausted. That campaign lasted over a year. We knocked on over 10,000 doors. I mean, it was a full-blown 24 hours a day campaign. I spent the next 3 years on city council, and it was such a great learning experience. I sat next to a guy named Kim Brizendine, very smart individual, but he took the other, he's just a thinker, but he would take the other side of every issue. So I had to learn how to do, I never took debate. I took the minimum amount of speech that you had to get out of school. But I had to learn how to defend my position, how to explain it, how to debate back and forth in a good, because we were friends, and also how to explain tough votes so people were sitting there looking right at you. During that time, they had another election cycle. It comes up every 2 years in the House. I didn't run. I was on city council. But then the next time they were doing redistricting. And my wife and I talked about it and said, okay, should we run again? Because I'm like, if anybody else good that I know wants it, they can have it. I'm not doing another year of that. It was brutal. But if I did, it had to be a friendly district, and I'm not running against an incumbent. Well, they called me up. First of all, the guy who'd run in the interim when I didn't run had a job change, moved out of the district. The other guy had moved out as well. So both people, one guy ran the same time I did, the other guy ran the other time that I didn't run, and they were both out. And then the guy who was going to become Speaker of the House called me up and said they'd tailor-made a district for me. So I had a friendly district. See, once again, that run that I had the first time was leading up because I met people like that who knew me and they were trying to help me get there. So I had a tailor-made district and I didn't have to run against an incumbent. So I got elected, and that's where I got started in the House. And after a while, I got to tell you, I was there, and you just can't believe you're there. I can't believe it. And after a while, I started meeting these other people, and how in the world they get here? And and then I started meeting people from their district, and I go, okay, that's how that makes sense. They're representing their district. So,
well, those origin stories are fun.
Yeah,
and that's how you build those relationships.
Yeah. But I look back on my life, it all made sense. It was preparing me for what was to come. I just didn't know it at the time.
Yeah, that's great.
But I'm so glad I said yes when I did say yes that first time.
That is something I try to do. Is if somebody asks me to do something, and my first inclination is to say, do I really say yes?
Yeah.
And things happen like that.
Well, I'll tell you a real quick little religious side of this. At the time I was asked, I was also been teaching this class called Experiencing God. And what you learn about is if God asks you to do something, he gives you a God-sized task. If you can figure out how to do it on your own, who gets the credit if you get it done? But if it's something you can't, beyond your wildest imagination, imagine that happening, if you take on that and say yes, then it happens, he gets the credit. And that's kind of the way I felt about running for elected official as a state representative out of the gate. That was a God-sized task.
Yeah.
It just, the timeline was different than I thought, but he was preparing me all along. I was meeting people that first time that helped make the second time more profitable.
So you've been both in the House and the Senate. We've talked about some of the differences and the procedures, but what made you decide to make that switch? Well,
I'd served 5 terms in the House. That's 10 years. And I really felt like I had maybe a term left. And just running out of gas. I felt like I'd done everything that I needed to do, could do, whatever. Well, then the senator at the time, Mike Jackson, who represented this area, said he was going to run for Congress. And normally when a senator retires or moves on, all the House members, not all of them, but you generally run against a bunch of other House members because they're all, not all, but some of them are ready to move up to the next thing. In my case, almost without question, every House member within that district wanted me to run for the Senate. And so, once again, I felt like I was being asked to do it, and I ran, and that's how I made the transition. I really thought I was done, but then once I got in the Senate, I got a second wind, right? And so I've been 10 years there, and I was going to think maybe I got one more term. And, I just, I guess my attention span or something, my weariness level gets up after about 10 years. But that's how I got to the Senate. Now, when you're in the Senate, House members call you House trained, which is kind of interesting. But it is important, I think, for senators who have been in the House to be able to even relate to other senators to tell them, hey, here's what's going on. Because some of the senators will freak out if they watch what's going on in the House because it's so weird, so different over there. Just real quick story. I moved over to the Senate with several of my colleagues from the House. And early in the session, we're standing in the back room. We're just kind of whispering like this back because it's like a library. We're just standing there in the back not bother anybody. All of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. Can we have some order from the freshmen? We're just like, what? I mean, we literally were whispering. But that's the difference in the House and the Senate. It's just,
So it sounds like the British version of the House of Lords.
yeah,
and
when
House
they're
of
yelling
Commons.
at each
Yeah.
other, yeah. But we're just, my esteemed colleague. That's probably one of the smartest people I know. This particular idea, not so much. But that's how. But in the House, it's just bare knuckles. I mean, they literally have fights on the floor in the lounge. I witnessed at least a couple of them. It's just bare knuckles. Get after it in the House. But there's 150 of them, so you don't have to have friends with everybody. But in the Senate, you have to have a certain number of votes to even bring it up on the floor for discussion.
Yeah.
So you can't afford to alienate a lot of people in that environment, by just totally ticking somebody else. That's why everybody's so nice, congenial, because I may need your vote on the next bill I want to bring up. So needing 18 or 19 votes to bring a bill up makes a difference.
Well, and I would encourage everyone to go up during session, like you said,
yeah.
go see the differences.
You got to see it.
But also go meet with some of the reps, and more than likely you'll meet with their staffers.
Yeah,
and
during session.
And that's when you realize the state's being run by young people.
Yeah. And part of the process I left out is the committee hearings. We brought that up through the bill process, but those committee hearings can go for hours. I mean, some committees are known for going 18, 19, just the committee hearing, overnight. They'll be done like 6 or 7 in the morning. And those guys got to be back at it the next day. So that's a grueling process, depending on how many bills the chairman puts on for a committee or what kind of bills. You get some of these real controversial bills.
Yeah.
And then people just line up to come testify for or against, whatever. I always try to stay off those committees.
Good move.
Yeah.
Now, anyway, it's been a pleasure to get to know you over the years and to see the work you've done. And I truly mean it when I say you've been a champion for this area.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to working with you, like you said, in other capacities. So thank you very much.
Well, I look forward to James. I appreciate the job you do in jumping in. I grew up at the Chamber of Commerce. This is where I kind of got started with my first public speaking and all that. So so I'm a very, very much a fan of our chambers of commerce and what they do for our communities and our business folks.
Well, again, it turned out great, and we appreciate all you've done for this community.
Well, thank you, James. And I appreciate the Clear Lake Chamber and all you do for your community.